Hello and welcome to Eastridge Connection again. First things first, we've got Alan Middleton with us today.
Alan,
A freshly shorn Alan Middleton.
look a little less homeless today. Yeah, that's a good thing.
Alan's one of our youth ministers here at Eastridge. If you don't know, no, that's not the important part.
Sure.
The important part is
no one would say the youth minister is the important part. Thank you. What's the important part?
The important part is that Alan and Jennifer have a little baby girl at home.
Girl. I'm
now.
A girl dad.
How many days today? Any clue?
Oh man, don't put me on the spot like that.
What day was she born?
She was born on March 12th.
Okay.
So she is almost 3 weeks old. Oh my gosh, time is flying. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Little
Awesome.
Caitlin James.
Awesome. We're excited. Now, what we're really excited about is the fact that the child was born in Texas. That's really what we're excited about.
She has been blessed that way. Yes.
I greatly appreciate Alan and Ryan both for the work they do, for the ministries that they are both a part of and head here at Eastridge. Today, I know that God's going to be at work in our conversation. What the three of us are going to do is just to simply strive to address some of the obstacles and some of the opportunities that our current circumstances bring. It's been a few years ago, but several years ago, during a sermon, I asked you guys to set an alarm on your phone. It didn't matter what time, just some sort of recurring time each day, and for the title of that alarm to ask the question, am I aware of God? Am I aware of God? And even though that's been, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, at times I'll have folks who will say, hey, my alarm still goes off. That's still something that's meaningful to me. And really, it's been surprising. Hey, people actually listen. And this is something that was beneficial.
We just wish they wouldn't put that alarm during services. It's the main thing. It's very distracting. Please don't do that.
Especially with like La Cucaracha as the
right.
That's like that.
Doesn't quite flow with the worship service.
But it's meaningful to them.
Today I want to pose a question, maybe to be asked at the end of a day, but a question that we're going to try to build off of today, at least during this conversation. And that's the question of, where did I find God? Where did I find God today? To maybe at the end of a day to kind of think back through the different events, the different things that we were a part of, the different obstacles that we were presented with, the different opportunities that we either capitalized upon, or maybe some of the opportunities even that we missed. But to see interactions with people and different events along the way, and at the end of a day, to be able to ask the question, where did I find God? And when I think about some of the things that we've been confronted with over the last several weeks, as a self-proclaimed introvert, if you were to ask me, hey, spend a few weeks at home by yourself or with your family, with limited outside interaction, I mean that sounds a little bit like heaven to me. At the same time, I'm a creature of habit. Maybe as an introvert, I like structure. I like each day to have kind of its own plan. And some of what we've experienced over the last several weeks has been, we've had to adapt along the way. And so trying to find God in all of that has been a challenge for me. And I think that's maybe a good place for us to build off of today. There are those in our church who have jobs, who are trying to adapt those jobs to the current climate. There's a little bit of a learning curve for so many of us. There are those who have jobs like, say, first responders, or those in the medical profession who are continuing to do their job times 2 or 3 or 10, and at the same time trying to keep themselves safe, trying to keep their families safe. So many of you are going to work every day, and your work is compounded by this. I'm even thinking of like those that work at Walmart or at Kroger or things like that, trying to do what they do, but to stay safe. And so this is no vacation. And there's a lot of stress and anxiety that goes along with it. That's what we've tried to address over the last couple of weeks. We've got folks here at Eastridge that are in a bit of a holding pattern with their jobs. We've got folks who have lost their jobs, and so what started out to be, well, maybe this will be a shelter-in-place sort of thing for a couple of weeks, now is looking longer and longer, and as we've talked about, mortgages are in jeopardy, or different financial sort of concerns that come up.
The rent has come due.
Yeah, right. We've had folks who are needing medical procedures who haven't been able to have, who aren't able to have them right now. We've got folks who have lost loved ones who can't do a memorial.
Yeah, that's hard.
Yet. I did a wedding Monday for a couple who had planned on getting married in May, and that wasn't going to happen. They had their license, and they're trying to figure everything out. So I did their ceremony, just the three of us, on Monday, and then after everything's said and done, then they'll figure out venue and reception and stuff like that later on. Even thinking about, we've had, I think, 4 babies born here at Eastridge over the last several weeks, which is awesome. At the same time, not necessarily the norm as far as people coming for visits.
Baby showers. I've not met your daughter and work 20 feet from you. And because of the current culture we're in, that's just not really something that's feasible. We lost a neighbor a couple of days ago. April and I lost a neighbor, and couldn't go to the hospital. There won't be a funeral. And so this is a very weird moment that we're in.
When Caitlin was being born, we were in the hospital, and they were in the midst of changing policy while we were there, while she was being born. So, as far as how many visitors could come in and see her, all those things were being changed. Exits and entrances were being closed and monitored. And so, I know there's been babies being born where only one person can be in the room, so mom couldn't be there, or someone close to the family couldn't be there. Yeah. They can't even wait in the waiting room. So big sacrifice is happening.
Yeah. So somehow trying to find God in all of this, to see God at work in all of this, and then also to be able to utilize this time that God has given us for His purposes. One of my favorite passages, favorite stories in the Bible is 1 Kings chapter 18, where you've got Elijah and the prophets of Baal.
Mount Caramel?
Mount Carmel, not Caramel.
Right.
And so you've got Elijah, this one prophet of God, against these 450 prophets of Baal, and there's this showdown on Mount Carmel where Elijah says, "Okay, I tell you what." You construct your altar, I'll construct my altar. Let's offer sacrifices. Let's call down fire from heaven. You call upon your God, I'll call upon my God. And whichever God shows up, well, that's the one true and living God. And which sounded great to the prophets of Baal, because Baal was the god of fire. So they're like, hey, home field advantage. And of course, they call down fire from heaven on their sacrifice, and nothing happens. Even there's one point where that I really like the sarcasm involved, where Elijah's like taunting them, and well, maybe your God is maybe he's busy.
He's away on vacation.
Just try it again.
He's asleep. He's a deep sleeper. that Baal.
And actually, in the NIV where it says maybe he's busy, in the Hebrew it actually says maybe he's using the restroom. Not making this up. That's actually what it says.
I knew you'd bring that up.
I know. That's awesome stuff.
Mature.
But then you have Elijah, who is trusting in God, who's relying upon God, and who's present in the moment, and calls upon God to show up, and God shows up in a very real and tangible and in such a profound way that can only be explained, that God is doing what God does when His people are seeking Him. And I think that's some of what God presents us with in these opportunities that we've got in front of us. Where are we finding God at work? And even thinking, I think it's in the next chapter, in 1 Kings chapter 18, chapter 19. You've got Elijah in this cave, and where he finds God is in a whisper. God's been at work in all of this, in this magnificent, overt sort of way, but he also finds the presence of God in a whisper there in this cave. And so Alan's going to speak to maybe some of that, being intentional with these moments that we have, allowing God to utilize both chaos and calm and everything in between, and for us to be stronger in our faith because of that.
Yeah, that's right. So while I think it's good that Jason acknowledged that there are people who are working overtime right now in their jobs, and there's probably people who are at home maybe find themselves being challenged in different ways because they're homeschooling kids and new challenges going on. But for a lot of us, we are finding that we have a lot of extra time, a lot of free time that we didn't have before. I know a lot of you are binge watching things on Netflix and taking in movies. I watched Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles yesterday,
of course you did.
And it was fantastic.
I really
well,
wish
1 and 2.
We're gonna have
Secret of the Use was there too.
Great.
Skip 3. It's not even worth it.
We're going to have to edit that out.
But I do want to point to the fact that we've been given this time, this opportunity, and I would hope to see that in this attempt to see God more, that we're not just hoping that it's just going to land on us, that we're just going to keep doing what we're doing, put in more time on Netflix, and then we're going to start seeing God more. We do have to have a little bit more intentionality in that, I think. I'm reminded of Matthew chapter 6. Jesus is teaching here on the Sermon on the Mount. And here starting in verse 5, he says, "And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received the reward in full." And then verse 6, "But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father, who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." I like this verse because it's not just about... it's awesome that we have the ability to come together and do the streaming services on Sunday and to watch a podcast and all these things. But there's so much value in seeking God in the times where you are by yourself, in the times where no one else around. I found this quote from A.W. Tozer, and I love it. It says, "If a man wants to be used by God, he cannot spend all of his time with people." And I think there's a profound truth to that if we're going to be looking for God and seeking God, I think there are going to be times that we see him where we're not even looking for him, but I think those experiences can become more common when we are seeking him in our alone time with him. Before I turn over to you guys to hear your thoughts, James chapter 4, verse 8. "Come close to God, and God will come close to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, for your loyalties divide between God and the world." Certainly, even at home, we can invite the world in as much as we'll allow it. And so it's us to be the gatekeepers of our own hearts and for our own families. Your guys' thoughts?
I think there's two different groups of people who are going to hear these messages, right? So there's group number one that is in a situation where this is free time, where this is a new normal, but it's free time where they've got the ability to maybe implement some things that they haven't been able to implement previously. But I think the second group of people who are going to hear this are people who are stretched to their absolute limit.
Yeah.
And to them, you mentioned if in a vacuum, if given the instruction or given the command for you that you're going to be home and you're going to have some downtime, that it would seem like this blessing. But for a lot of people who are in that circumstance where the mortgage is due, bills are due, and they don't know where that money is going to come from, I think there's two different mentalities, right? And so the idea of finding peace in our alone time is going to sound really different to those two groups of people. Does that make sense?
Well, or even just trying to do what you do, but doing it in a different environment, doing it in a different way, or through a different avenue.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Yeah. Well, I guess to tack on my piece of this conversation, which is, I tend to do things from a family perspective. As the family life minister here and as a family counselor, I tend to view everything through the lens of family life and how it relates to relationships. And so one of the things that jumped out to me was I looked at, Jason, you asked for us to think of passages that were meaningful to us in this moment, right? And so that's kind of what we came in with the idea of. I went to Deuteronomy 6 because we find these, family codes and what we are supposed to do with these moments. It begins in verse 5, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commands that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them upon your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and your gates. There's a lot of imagery there about our homes, about this being a local project, right? So instilling faith being a home-based activity. When we don't have the economic concerns that we have right now, I want to go to this passage and say we need to implement more faith in the home, and we need to have more open dialogue about Jesus in the home, and we need to talk to our kids about these things. In this moment, I'm very sensitive to the fact, though, that we've got to wade through some of the stress and some of the abject fear that some of our families are facing right now. So to go address what you were saying, I think that we hear this from two different lenses. I think there's two different people listening to this podcast. Those who have a lot of free time and are figuring out, like, this is great. Our schedules are relaxed. I'm not, as I say almost in every podcast, you guys know this, I'm not a huge social media fan, but I have noticed how many people in my own social media feeds are reflecting on this time as being, it's great. We don't have anywhere to be, and I'm able to read more, and I'm watching more TV, and we're cooking at home, and we're having all this family time. What I'm not seeing is some of the posts from the people that I get phone calls from, who they're home and they're going crazy because they if as long as they're home, they're not making any money, and as long as they're not making any money, those bills that are about to be due are not going to be paid.
And they're not quick to post about that.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Well, and those people, I think, feel a bit left out at times when we talk about, well, let's just take this moment to slow down. That's easy to say when you don't worry that you're going to be able to pay your mortgage.
That's right.
It's a lot harder to say when that's a real fear that you've got.
I think about just my older kids and how my oldest son and his wife both are teachers, but my son teaches history, and my daughter-in-law is a softball coach. And so as teachers, now kind of moving into this new sort of normal, they both have different sorts of approaches. You know, he's got curriculum that he's generating and things that he's putting out there, trying to keep his students connected and giving them work. Whereas she doesn't have as much of that. Even though they're both teachers, they're both going about things in a different sort of way. My oldest daughter, Casey, who was supposed to walk across the stage in graduation on May 8th. The graduation has now been tabled until maybe August. Yeah. My middle son Jacob, who's a welder, he hasn't been laid off, but they've told him we have no work until this is over. And then my youngest son Bowen being down at A&M. Everything's online. Finish out your semester, and that times a million is what everyone's trying to do. Even the three of us in our different areas of ministry, trying to connect with a youth group through different avenues.
That's
and
right.
Keep them plugged in. Trying to counsel and minister to people over the phone as opposed to in person
and in video chat. Which I listen. It's more effective than nothing, but I don't like counseling that way. I want to be in the room with people. I want to be able to read body language. I want to hear sighs, and I want to be able to see things that I can't see on the phone and I can't see video chat. So you talked about teachers having a different approach to what they're doing right now. I'm gonna relay a story that I'm hearing pretty consistently. So I'm still doing video counseling and I'm still doing phone counseling. And one of the stories that I've heard a lot is of parents whose jobs have been moved digitally. So they're having to work remotely, having to work from home. But then simultaneously, now they've got elementary age kids who are home, who now need help getting online and getting into these multitude of Zoom sessions they're supposed to have with their teachers. Right. And so I've got parents who I'm talking to who are saying, how do I do this? I got a conference call that I've got to be on with all of our regional people, this is a story again of a counseling session I had recently. I've got a call with regional people with my company that I've got to be on while simultaneously getting my kid onto his Spanish homework and getting him into his Zooms, and I don't know how to balance these two things. And so it's interesting to watch as we all kind of move to this digital existence, how many times we're stepping on each other's toes, and I don't think we realize that. I don't think we realize how stressful and impactful some of those decisions have been.
I was just remarking, there's all that going on, but man, what a blessing it's been. If this happened even just 5 or 10 years ago, how much less we'd be prepared to have these sort of digital interactions and be able to continue doing ministry in new ways and stream things and put out podcasts and have cahoots and Zoom game nights with teens and all these things. that's so awesome. Even we were remarking at earlier in this year, we just started buying microphones for podcasts and cameras and just getting things ready for digital content. And then all of a sudden this happens. And I think we've been able to see God in that and how He's been preparing us for what's happening now.
Absolutely.
There's a couple of verses in Proverbs chapter 3 that maybe many of us, learned whenever we were kids, to trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. He'll direct your paths. He'll make your paths straight. And I wonder if those two verses, Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6, I wonder if those two verses aren't really being tested right now. Trusting in God with all your heart. Trust in God, and know that God is going to. He's going to direct our paths, but we've got to be in tune. We've got to be open to Him. Acknowledge Him. Acknowledge His presence in the middle of all of this, whether it's uncertainty and chaos, or just within the learning curve, or maybe even if it's in some of the alienation or some of the quiet. Everything in between. To trust in God, to acknowledge His presence, and then to lean into Him and to know that He's going to direct our paths. He's going to make our paths straight. But to have some confidence in that, and maybe even in and through all of that, to come back to where we began. This question of where did I find God today? To be asking that question at the close of a day. Where did I find God? Am I being open to Him? Are my eyes wide open to God being at work, to God doing what He does? Where did I find God? Because I think that we find Him doing what He does in the strangest of places, in the most unlikely of places. That's oftentimes where He does His best work. It's just a matter of having the capacity to trust Him and the faith to be able to see Him at work. And maybe even to ask ourselves the question, take a step back with wherever we fit on this paradigm, and to take a step back and to ask the question, are we utilizing this time? Good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. Are we utilizing this time that God has given us? And we're not going to do that unless we're finding Him at work, seeking to see how He's at work.
Yeah, if you take 10 minutes out of your time of cleaning out your garage or whatever else you have time for now that you didn't have time for before, to give to God and to anticipate, where am I seeing God today? How am I spending time with God? I think that's great. You mentioned ending the day with where did I see God today? And I've really enjoyed starting my day with, I let Jennifer have a little extra sleep, and I usually get to hold Caitlin for a couple hours in the morning. And that's usually a good time for me to think about where am I going to see God in this day. And that's kind of good for me just to anticipate and put myself in the mental state of where am I going to see God throughout my interactions today and in my lack of interactions today as well.
So I want to speak to that idea clinically for just a second, right? So we have a tendency.
We're crazy.
Yes. Clinically, you both got some serious problems.
All right.
But you give me some good things to talk about. So clinically speaking, there's a mode that we get in when life gets hard and when things get challenging. Our minds have a tendency to kind of go slant towards that negative aspect, right? So life gets really difficult. And we wake up during the day, and because things are hard and because we're struggling, we're more prone to identifying those things that validate the fact that we're struggling, right? So we focus on the negatives. It's if I can give you a picture of what it looks like. If you're struggling to pay bills, you're more likely to miss a sweet moment you may have with your kid, where your kid wants to give you a big hug. You're more likely to miss that because you're focused on the negative, right? Sure. So whether it's dealing with anxiety issues or issues of depressive symptomology, we are just prone to really slanting towards whichever direction we feel our life is going, and that's what we'll notice. When we feel like things are going well, we see all the good stuff. When we feel like things are going poorly, we see all the bad stuff. And I say that because what you guys are asking, you're asking people to ask the question out loud, where did I see God today, or where will I see God today? And the reason that's so vital to our mental health, in addition to just our spiritual health, the reason it's so vital to our mental health is my hope is those questions get you to not only reflect on where God's blessings are, but to shift your mind towards some of those positive things. I try my best to articulate to people that nothing is ever really in this world all good, all bad. It's usually shades of both, and we're having to make nuanced decisions. And so the ability to find good, even in a moment where you may have lost your job, you may not know where the money for the next mortgage check is going to come from. You may be, I joke about this, but at this point, it's getting to a point where I'm not sure I can joke about it anymore. You may not have had toilet paper in your house for a week, which is a funny, ridiculous sentence unless you're dealing with it. In which case, you're dealing with something that you 2 months ago would have never imagined that you'd be dealing with in this culture. But I say that because in those moments where things are really hard, where you're struggling, where every time you turn on the TV, it seems like the news is worse. It is more vital now than ever to take those moments to ask yourself, where did I see God? Where do I want to see God? Because my hope is that allows you to see that there's beauty even in this moment too.
Yeah, and how can I strengthen my faith through all of this? And a lot of our folks have families, and so trying to utilize these moments as a family, whether it's a teachable moment or as a time to be able to say, we haven't spent as much time studying God's Word or praying together. We're going to be more intentional with that as a family, or maybe even as an individual, as a single person or a person that lives alone. I'm going to utilize this time to be able to really dig deep into this faith that I've had maybe even my entire life, but to really invest into drawing close to God and for God to utilize this, whether it's things are going your way and things seem healthy in most every way, or if things are dark and things just aren't going very well, to be able to lean in on God and to trust in God, but also to be able to invest into this relationship that we know is so very crucial. Final thoughts? Anything else maybe to discuss or?
I do want to make sure that we reiterate to our Eastridge members that if they are going through any kind of a tough time where they need to talk to someone or any kind of financial needs or toilet paper needs or whatever needs you have, and you feel like you don't have anyone to reach out to, please reach out to us, whether that's by calling the office or texting one of us or emailing one of us. Please do that, because we do want to help.
Our elders and ministers are available. And in addition to that, we're still doing counseling. I'm sure you've gotten that through this. In fact, the need right now has gotten to be so much that I brought on another counselor. So you'll be getting an email about that here in the next couple of days if you're here at Eastridge. But please, and this is something that I know we discussed in kind of our pre-conversation prior to doing this. The thing that I would encourage those of you who are struggling to a degree that there's stress in your home and that this moment is not this calming breath of fresh air, that this moment is stress-inducing, and every day you wake up hoping you can go back to work.
Right.
For those of you in that situation, I want to encourage you as best I can to not carry that weight around by yourself and to not bury it. I understand husbands and fathers. I understand if you don't feel compelled to open up and de-stress in front of your kids or in front of your wife because you're fearful of what the impact on them will be. I'm sensitive to that. Pick up the phone and call us. Call one of the elders. Call a friend that you trust. Call a mentor. Call somebody that you can have a conversation with where you can get those things out. I can't stress enough how counter it is to our mentality sometimes as providers, but how vital it is that when we struggle, we say it out loud. And that we let those thoughts come out so that we can process them accordingly, so that they don't stay inside of us and then come out as us screaming our heads off because someone left a light on, which is generally how this manifests itself when we don't get it out.
Awesome. Can I get you to lead a prayer just a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Keep doing what you're doing. Keep trusting in God. Try to see God at work in everything. Ask yourself the question, where did I find God today? Or maybe to see those opportunities, where will I find God today? And to seek to be intentional in not limiting the ways that God shows up for His people. Alan's going to lead us in a closing prayer.
Join me in prayer. Dear Lord, Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. God, there are a lot of things that we are dealing with and in different ways and different situations. And God, I ask that we will lean into you during this time. We will go to you for peace and go to you for for mercy, and God, for wisdom. God, we ask that as you put us in specific situations, that you will work through us to bless those around us, whether that's through social media or making a telephone call, whatever it is. God, just use us as your church, that we can be a blessing to the people around us. God, we thank you for the ministers here on staff, the elders, the people who are dedicated to your people. We ask that you'll continue to work through us as we minister. God, thank you for the opportunities that you are giving us to see you through all this, and to allow ourselves to spend more time with you. Lord, that we will see the good in all of this, and that the good that can come from this, and that we will keep things positive. We will be mindful of our mental health, and as well as our spiritual health. God, we thank you for your Son, who sacrificed the biggest sacrifice that can be made by dying on the cross for our sins. We pray all these things through his holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us, guys.